Good morning, class. I thought I'd give a brief little lecture here over Virginia Woolf's classic 1942, The Death of the Moth. As you know, The Death of the Moth is a reflective essay written by Virginia Woolf, first published in 1942. So if you did get a chance to sort of look at her bio, you realize this particular essay was published after her death. And in this particular essay, Woolf contemplates the fleeting nature of life and the inevitable ability of death throughout the observation of a moth's struggle to survive. So, a little bit of background about the actual essay, summary. The essay begins with Woolf watching a moth flying about her window pane on a summer's morning. She observes the moth's futile attempts to escape the confines of the window, repeatedly hitting the glass. Despite its persistent efforts, the moth is unable to break free. As Woolf watches the moth struggle, she becomes absorbed in the creature's determination and resolve. And you can kind of see she goes through a lot of description about this struggle. She sees the life of the moth, how it is struggling inside the particular house, but also she sort of contrasts that with sort of the life and the energy outside of the house. Woolf then dives into a broader meditation on the transitory nature of life and the universality of death. She reflects on how life's vitality contrasts with its eventual demise, highlighting the fragility and impermanence of existence. She draws parallels between the moth's struggle and the human experience, suggesting that, like the moth, humans are also strived against various obstacles only to ultimately succumb to mortality. So a good contrast there between what is going on outside of her particular room or her house and what's going inside um, her particular house. As the essay progresses, Woolf notes how the moth's energy and movement begin to wane. She observes that the moth's struggle becomes slower and weaker, yet its refusal to give up entirely. In the moth's persistent fight for life, Woolf finds a poignant metaphor for the human struggle against mortality. Her essay concludes with the moth's death. As its movements become feeble and finally cease, Woolf reflects on the moth's quiet death and its symbolic significance in illuminating the universality of death and the beauty in life's fleeting moments. So it's a really short piece, as you know, barely 2 pages. Um, it does fit sort of the criteria of what a good narrative is, and we will sort of look at that here momentarily. Sort of give you some analysis. This may help you when it comes to answering that weekly question that refers to this particular essay. So the death of the moth is a contemplative and introspective essay that explores existential themes. Throughout the imagery of the moth's struggle, Woolf crafts a meditated meditation on life, death, and the human condition. The essay's somber tone emphasizes the inevitability of death and the transient nature of all living things. Woolf's use of symbolism, particularly the moth, allows her to dive into profound philosophical questions. The moth becomes a vehicle through which Woolf examines the human desire for survival, the persistence of life in the face of adversity, and the poignant contrast between life's vitality and its ultimate end. The essay is also notable for its prose style, characterized by Woolf's characteristic stream of consciousness narrative. Her lyrical and evocative language adds emotional depth to the essay, inviting readers to reflect on their own mortality and the significance of life's fleeting moments. In conclusion, The Death of the Moth by Woolf is a reflective piece that employs the struggles of a moth as a metaphor to explore existential themes of life, death, and the human experience. Woolf's elegant prose and insightful observation make the essay a thoughtful, provoking exploration of the delicate balance between life's vitality and its inevitable conclusion. So we can all kind of relate to this particular essay in a lot of ways. As humans, we have sort of a beginning, middle, and end, which sort of plays a part to what a narrative does. It tells a story, has a beginning, middle, and end. She just uses a simple creature or a simple insect, that of being the moth, to sort of show that particular beginning, middle, and end as it relates to how a narrative is sort of shaped, how it is created. Of course, when we see the moth, we realize this is probably, it's not the beginning of the moth's life. It's probably starting sort of in the middle of where we're at as it relates to the moth's life, and we see eventually its demise. It can no longer get out of the house. And then, some folks will say that, why does Wolf, if she sees this thing struggling, why doesn't she intervene somehow and either open the window or, capture it in her hand and see it out the door? Which is a good question. Why doesn't she sort of come to the rescue? Maybe she doesn't feel the need to intervene in the course of nature here, have nature sort of run its course. If we look a little bit more at why this is a really good narrative to sort of start with when we start talking about narrative essays, one is the vivid imagery and descriptive language that Woolf uses throughout this piece. Woolf's essay is a rich descriptive language and vivid imagery. She paints a clear picture of the moth's struggle, the surroundings, and the emotions it evokes. This provides a great example for students to learn how to use sensory details and descriptive language to engage readers and create a vivid setting. So again, when we get into descriptive writing about week 3 and week 4, you're going to use a little bit more of sensory language and details during that particular couple weeks in essay 2. But usually with a good narrative, you're going to go ahead and start having some vivid surroundings. You want to add some descriptive. You don't go to a movie and strip everything out and just have dialogue and a soundtrack. You have a setting, you have a building, you have a house, you have, ocean, you have sand, you have something there that you can visually see, you can interact possibly with, because, we know how sand feels in between our toes. We know how the salt air, or how the water smells from the beach. So when you have details in your particular work, it makes that work a whole lot better. It brings it to life. So when you're thinking about your first essay and those 5 essay topics, choose one that you think you can start, integrating some sensory details into it. Think of your 5 senses: taste, touch, hear, see, feel. Because really we're sort of getting closer to the descriptive writing aspect of the course, which again would be week 3 and week 4. So you can go ahead and start integrating some of this stuff in. In a lot of ways, narrative and descriptive writing sort of go hand in hand. That's why you see a lot of times they're sort of taught closely together, like I'm doing. A couple weeks with narrative, a couple weeks with descriptive. It's because you kind of need one and you sort of need the other. You can't really have one without the other, without it really being a flat piece of writing. Or if you're doing something creative like a film or a piece of music or something of that nature, if you don't have one or the other, you're going to have a flat piece of whatever you're trying to create there. A couple other reasons why this is a really good essay to sort of read the first week as we get into learning about narrative writing is the symbolism and metaphor. Now, if you had any type of literature classes in high school and middle school, you've probably heard the word symbolism, you've probably heard the word metaphor. The essay's central metaphor, of course, of the moth's struggle and eventual death serves as an excellent example of how to use symbolism and metaphor to convey a deeper meaning. So the moth is more or less a symbol, it's symbolic, but it's also a metaphor. It has that deeper meaning to us. It demonstrates how a seemingly simple event can be infused with symbolic significance, encouraging students to think critically about the layers of meaning in their own narrative. So think about whatever essay topic you choose from that list for essay one. Think about something that could be symbolic or represent a metaphor in your particular narrative, like Woolf does here with this little moth. Um, if you've read anything from Virginia Woolf, besides this piece, she has written other short stories. She was very profound with novel writing, but she has her own style of narrative. It's called stream of consciousness. James Joyce, the Irish writer, also sort of uses a stream of consciousness technique throughout some of his works. For some folks, it can be kind of confusing because you kind of have to go back and reread sometimes what the author is trying to get across as it relates to the meaning. Um, but Woolf's narrative style in this essay follows the stream of a consciousness approach, allowing readers to dive into the narrative's thoughts and reflections. So when we're actually reading this, her words, we're sort of in her head because we're sort of like her eyes. We're sort of sitting down in this chair while she's looking out of the window, and then she glances over and sees this poor, pitiful moth trying to escape the confines of the house to get out and enjoy life. Um, this particular approach can help students understand how to effectively incorporate introspection and inner monologue into their own narratives, which adds depth to their characters and themes. So I know your particular essay only needs to be about 3 or 4 pages in length. You may want to think about adding some dialogue, and we can kind of talk a little bit how to go about styling that if you want to add characters in your particular story. Um, Being that it's a relatively short essay of 3 to 4 pages, I wouldn't I wouldn't try to turn this into like a Shakespearean play where you have 70 characters and about 60 of them die. You just don't have the time or the space to do that. But obviously, if the narrative is about you, you are part of that character. You play one part of a character as the writer. You can add a couple other characters, right? You can have your parents, you can have your significant other, a brother, a sister, depending on whether you're going fiction or nonfiction with it. You can have, an animal sort of become a character. That really is up to you. Again, most narratives do have some sort of a dialogue. They do have some characters interacting, and then sometimes it helps get the story going from page 2 to page 3. Because a lot of times we will write down, and before we know it, hey, we got 2 pages of stuff, and that's pretty much all I can say. Well, you need to sort of explore using character and using dialogue to sort of extend that story out a little bit more, if that's the problem. The other problem is if you get to the point where you said everything you could say in 2 pages, chances are either you just picked a really poor topic, and maybe if there's time, go back and choose another one that you can, get the 3 to 4 pages in. Or again, think about entering some dialogue between characters or having some sort of a inner monologue like Woolf does in this particular piece. We're going to read another piece next week. You're not really going to have anything per se assignment wise relating to next week's piece. The reason why I'm giving you sort of 2 pieces to read, one week you do have an exercise on, and the second week you're sort of just reading it for the sake of reading it, is I want to show you 2 really good A quality examples of what a narrative essay looks like. Same thing with descriptive essay. You're going to have the same sort of setup there. And if you look at the stuff in your e-text, you're going to see A quality narrative essays, A quality descriptive essays from student writers. So a lot of the stuff that I'm giving you are either students who have A quality work, or it's professional writers that have actually been published and paid for their work. So all this stuff is going to help you craft and draft your particular essays as we move along in this course. Now, next week, week 2, the big assignment that you're going to have to do, and you probably want to try to get that in as early as possible. I think the deadline is Thursday by 11:59. Is your rough draft to your narrative essay. Basically, it's a peer review that you're going to do with your peers. Again, you want to probably use tutor.com and myself to give you at least 3 sets of eyes to look at your work. So when you submit that final essay on September 3rd, you would get the best possible grade. Other things that make this particular essay really good to examine and read is the exploration of themes. The Death of the Moth explores profound themes such as mortality, the human condition, and the fleeting nature of life. This can inspire students to consider meaningful and thoughtful provoking themes for their own narrative essays, encouraging them to go beyond surface level storytelling. So again, you've probably heard this term or this phrase at some point in other English classes. You want to show rather than tell, right? You show how a narrative comes to life with the verbs that you use, vivid and active verbs, with the sensory details that you use. You just don't want to simply tell me a story. You want to show me with your writing how this is a really good story that has a beginning, middle, and end. Transitions and pacing, right? When we deal with Woolf, she has the ability to pace herself with the act of storytelling, and also use several transitional periods to make that happen. So Woolf masterfully transitions between moments of action and reflection, and we can see that throughout. She goes back and forth from looking out of the window, looking out at some of the folks outside, where we see life actually happening, and then she contrasts that with looking back at the window with the moth, where the little creature is basically beating himself to death, trying to get out and to experience life. So with this action and reflection, it creates a rhythmic pace in the essay. This can serve as a valuable lesson for students in managing the flow of their own narratives, knowing when to slow down for introspection and when to pick up the pace for moments of action. So think of that. Sometimes if you feel like you're saying everything and you get to the end of page 2 and that's all you got to say, see if you can kind of go back and craft that. See if you can slow down in places where you really need to slow down, and then pick up the pace where there's action. It also has a very good emotional impact. Woolf's essay evokes emotions through her evocative language and the poignant subject matter. Studying how she achieves emotional impact can help students learn how to engage readers' emotions in their own writing, creating a stronger connection between the narrative and the audience. So again, think of ethos, pathos, and logos. We will probably get involved with these a little bit more as the semester goes on. The ethos is sort of, it fits that ethical appeal. Logos fits that logical appeal, and pathos fits the pathetic appeal. It's more of it's the emotion, pulling at your heartstrings. Each piece of writing that we read, each piece of writing sometimes that we write, it's going to invoke some of these 3, and really they're coming from Greek, coming back from the Greek culture, Greek writing. ethos, pathos, and logos. It also serves as a personal connection. The essay's introspective nature allows students to connect with the narrative's thoughts and reflections on a personal level. So using that stream of consciousness narrative technique that Woolf does, we're able to connect with not only the narrative's thoughts, but we're also able to see the reflections on a more deeper personal level with her. This can encourage students to infuse their own narratives with authentic emotions and personal insights. Last, really, we have universal themes. The themes explored in this essay are universal and they are relatable, making it accessible to a wide range of readers. So anybody in Japan, anybody in England, anybody in Alabama, if they can pick up and understand English, they can relate to these universal and relatable themes. This can inspire students to choose topics that resonate with a broad audience and convey meanings and messages that are meaningful to a lot of folks beyond just me being the reader and the grader, but also your classmates. Because again, you're going to engage in a peer review coming up. So you want something that maybe when you're writing your particular narrative essay that we can all sort of relate to. Usually good stories are ones that deal with universal themes, that we can relate to these things. So in a lot of ways, this is really what Woolf's essay is about as it relates to um, the struggle, the human struggle, the life and death of not only a moth, but also humans. Um, it's also a really good piece to use, like I said, and just explain when it comes to creating your own narrative essay. So I hope everybody has had a very good first week. I know it's probably been sort of hectic on many levels, especially if this is your first time taking a class that's either online or hybrid. Just know that if you survive the first week, you can, with a bit of patience and time management, week 2, week 3, week 4, as long as you sort of keep up with the reading and the assignment due dates and that type stuff, shouldn't, I hope, be as hectic as the first week. I hope everybody does have a great rest of your Thursday. Please reach out by email, or you can set up something through Teams if you want to do an office hour or tutoring. If you're close to the Camden County campus, you can always set up something, in-person tutoring or in-person office hours if you want to go that route with it. I'm here to help. I want to help, but as I said before, I can't read minds. So unless you are reaching out because you do need the help, I'm just assuming that everybody knows what they're doing with their narrative essay coming up and are having no problems answering the weekly question this week. All right, so some other things maybe real quick about the particular question, because a lot of students are asking, well, how many words or how long should this particular assignment, the Woolf assignment, be? And really what I've been telling, and I'm kind of letting this sort of, I want to see how well you can sort of structure yourself when it comes to your own writing, meaning I don't necessarily want a whole essay on this question because, I mean, you probably don't want to write that long. So what I've been telling folks is answer the question with as many words or as many sentences as you think you need. If you think you can answer the question successfully in 3 or 4 sentences, great, do so. And then just stop, because there's no need to keep writing on something that you've already answered. If you think, you get to the end of sentence 4 or 5 and you feel like there's still something missing, that it doesn't feel complete to you, then I would continue to keep writing. I would say maybe a good size paragraph, anywhere from maybe 5 to 10 sentences. If you're really wanting a ballpark figure or number, 250 words is basically, if you double space that or whatever, that's a page. Half of 250 would be about 125 words. So if you're looking for something, maybe a good sized paragraph would probably be about 125 words. So that'd be half a page if you were picking this up on Microsoft Word. But again, use your own common sense. Obviously, one word is not going to work. So don't give me a yes, no, or maybe. Really, the question is not set up for that. Don't, one sentence, two sentences are probably, depending on how well you craft those and how much information you can pack into one or two sentences, I would say that would still be kind of difficult to include everything that you wanted to include and still answer this question. But hey, you may be creative enough to be able to do that. But again, if you're looking for a number, I would say half a page, a good sized paragraph, 125 words, something of that nature. You don't have to sit there and belabor it. You don't have to give me 9 pages. I would say if you're going more than one page on this, you're probably giving me too much, because really I only give you one question and it shouldn't take you that long, especially if you did the reading and you do a little bit of thinking, because again, these are universal themes. This particular rhetorical question that I'm asking you to look at as it relates to the 5th paragraph is, something that we, not only as human beings, we think about throughout life. Because it basically says, right? It says in the 5th paragraph of Woolf's essay, she asks a rhetorical question. What had happened there? Woolf's question urges us as readers to pause and see the shift from the energetic external world to the moth's struggle and intimate death. So again, this is sort of that transitional period, or one of these transitional periods that I was just talking about, that Woolf is sort of pacing the story. She slows down when it's time to have this philosophical internal monologue, I guess. But she also picks up the pace when she's watching the activities going on outside. So at times, we also, as human beings, when we're sitting down, looking outside, looking inside, we're also having to slow down the pace and think about life. Think about where you're going to be maybe in 20 minutes. Think about where you're going to be in 2 months. Think about where you're going to be in 2 years. Think about where you're going to be possibly in 2 decades. Think about where you came from, depending on how old you are. Think about the stuff that happened when you were 5, when you were 13, when you were 25. So, I mean, this is a period that we, with narrative writing, you have a chance to also reflect. So think about also too, when you're doing your narrative essay, remember your verb tenses in that particular essay are probably going to be that of a past tense nature. You're not really giving me too much in the future because you don't really know what's going on or what's going to happen in the future. You're not really telling me too much presently what's going on, because that could be difficult to write, because to presently write a narrative, you would have to basically continue to write it each day, or finish it in one day. So you're thinking about stuff that's happened to you in the past. You're giving sort of a reflection, a introspection of that particular topic, just sort of like Woolf is doing here. So again, I hope this helps. Please reach out if you need to reach out for anything. And I will be in touch soon. And I hope everybody has a good, wonderful weekend. And just look at it this way. We're going to be heading into week 2 very shortly. And everybody has seemingly survived week 1. So I know y'all can do really well. I'm looking forward to reading some of these responses. I have read some of these responses and provided a grade so far in some of them, so you might want to go back and kind of look at that. But ultimately, I'm glad you're here in the class, and I wish you the very best in your success, not only in this class, but your other classes as we move ahead.